On this, the January 2nd, 2024 edition of What's Going On with Shipping, Maersk exits the Red Sea again. I'm your host, Al Mercogliano. Happy New Year, 2024, our first episode of the new year. It's a big one because Maersk has announced they are once again withdrawing from the Red Sea. We're going to take a look at this, what the impact has on global shipping, and most importantly, talk about some events coming up here on the channel. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's jump into this. So the latest update from Maersk, I'm going to go through all 6 updates, but this is the most recent one on January 2nd, is regarding the 30 December attacks on the ship, the Maersk Hangzhou. I hope I said that right. I have listened to so many different audio versions of how to say this city, and I've had so many people comment about it that I mispronounced it. And let me be clear, I mispronounce everything. So don't feel like I am being racist at all, because I equally mispronounce things across all nationalities and words. But Maersk Hangzhou was attacked on 2 separate occasions, once on the 30th December by ballistic missiles, and on the 31st of December, early in the morning, by 4 small boats that attempted to board the vessel. Maersk had embarked a security team on board. Now, this is a private security team. These were not U.S. soldiers or armed forces from Israel or any other nation. This was a private security detachment, very common in this area. Maersk Hangzhou would have stopped out in the Gulf of Aden at a small offshore supply vessel, embarked the team, brought the weapons on board. They would have been up on deck to defend the vessel. According to reports, the 4 boats approached the Maersk vessel. They were warned off. They opened fire on the Maersk Hangzhou, and the embarked team returned fire. And then helicopters from the USS Eisenhower and USS Gravely arrived on scene and sank 3 of the 4 boats. Now, let's be clear. Sank 3 of the 4 boats, killed the crews on those 3 of the 4 boats after they had fired on the commercial vessel, ordering it to stop and heave to and basically follow it into Yemen waters, which no one's going to do. The Maersk update goes on here that there's an investigation into the incident. They're re-looking at the issues, and that they are committed, they tell you, to minimizing the impact on the customer supply chain and continue to keep updated on the situation. They have established a diversion and contingency plan page, which I will show you in a second. All right, so let's take a step back here for a second and look at how this has transpired. So Maersk was the first one to initiate this back in 15 December. This comes after the attack on another Maersk vessel. This is on the Maersk Gibraltar. And the near miss against Maersk Gibraltar on 14 December led Maersk and also Hapag-Lloyd, a German container liner, to decide that they're going to bypass the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the Gulf of Aden, and start heading ships around Africa. And you had the mass movement of ships around Africa. So this is marine traffic. They did a video on this showing the diversions. These are tracking major container vessels, those over about 6,000 to 8,000 TEU. And you'll see here all of a sudden that traffic that was heading through the Red Sea right here, through the Suez, Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, out to the Gulf of Aden, all of a sudden just disappears. You see them drop off. So it is a sizable move. Once Maersk and Hapag announced their diversions, that really opened the floodgate for these large container ships to divert around Africa. Now, Maersk issued an update to this on 19 December, where basically they just affirmed their decision that based on everything they're seeing, they're going to reroute around Africa. And understand the reason container ships are doing this, more so than liquefied natural gas carriers, oil tankers, product tankers, bulk carriers, is because the value on board container ships is so much higher. The value of a tanker may be just under $100,000 with all the cargo on board, but when you start looking at container ships, you're talking about values of, maybe the average container is anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 in value on board, and you start talking about 10,000, 15,000 box ships, you're talking about values of hundreds of millions of dollars. And so therefore the insurance, as the insurance value increased and the insurance risk increased, the diversion became more and more prevalent. And then came Christmas Eve, and this is where Maersk once again kind of threw the wrench into everything. They sat there and said, based on the recent activities, largely because of the announcement and the security initiative that was Operation Prosperity Guardian, this is the escorting of ships through the region by the U.S. Fifth Fleet, the combined maritime forces, and CTF 153, that they're now going to basically initiate a limited resumption of trade, prepared to allow for vessels to resume transit through the Red Sea, both eastbound and westbound. We are working on plans for the first vessels to make the transit and for this to happen as soon as operationally possible. So right off the bat, they did that. Now, I do have questions about this, and I am happy for Maersk to contact me and let me know, because I've tried to get answers from Maersk and I have not been able to get them. Did Maersk coordinate this with the combined maritime forces, or did they just decide to go ahead and do it? Because all of a sudden, what you saw was Maersk dispatch about a dozen vessels heading toward the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandab. And that's a lot of ships coming through all of a sudden of high-vis targets. Now understand, a couple of lines have gotten a lot of attention. Mediterranean Shipping Company had several vessels targeted, and we see that Maersk has had several vessels targeted. There's a good reason for that. Maersk and MSC have been in a container alliance with Zim. This is the Israeli national firm. And Maersk vessels do frequent going in and out of Israel. Mediterranean Shipping Company, the wife of the owner of Mediterranean Shipping Company, has dual citizenship, both in Switzerland and in Israel. So those two lines have been extremely targeted by the Houthi. So this is the 29 December update. Now understand, one of the things that Maersk was basing this on was a successful passage of several Maersk Line ships through the region. Now, Maersk Line is the Maersk subsidiary in the United States. Two separate companies, share the same name. Maersk Line Limited handles U.S. flag shipping. Principally, they're handling ships that are receiving a $5 million per year per ship stipend to be in the U.S. flag under something called the Maritime Security Program. And the U.S. Department of Defense requires that ships hauling U.S. combat gear and U.S. DoD gear, Department of Defense gear, be U.S. flagged. And so those ships had a lot of high priority. And 4 ships, 3 of them Maersk Line Limited ships, were run through just before Christmas. And so Maersk was looking at that along with that passage and sitting there saying, okay, this looks like it is a better situation, and they continue to update that. As we see here, they updated this. Our teams have now started to update voyage plans on a vessel-by-vessel basis, which will see the first vessels pass through the Red Sea again. This is most welcome news for the entire industry. Well, okay, Maersk is excited for Maersk. And the functionality of global trade. Please note that for the foreseeable future, voyage plans are expected to include transits through the Red Sea as well as shipments diverted via the Cape of Good Hope. So Maersk was hedging their bets. They were not putting everything heading toward the Red Sea. They still had a lot of vessels heading around. And the majority of the vessels coming to the Red Sea were coming from Europe and America. And I've talked about this immensely, is this is part of the Maersk effort to get empty containers back to Asia. The way the container system works, it's kind of like a shell game. You got to keep the shells moving. And you have to be moving full and empty containers back and forth. The empty containers have to be dropped off to be reloaded so that you have full containers to go out. There's a lot of containers moving through the system. And if you throw a 2 to 3 week extra voyage around Africa, you're going to throw off the system. And that was the big fear. So then you have the attack on Maersk Hangzhou. And Hangzhou. And this is the one that creates all the problems. You see here at 1800 local time, it was hit by an unknown object after passing through the Bab el-Mandab from Singapore to Port Suez. No indication of fire on board, able to continue the transit north. After the attack, 4 boats approaches, and we've already talked about this story. Now, the crew was safe. We know that U.S. destroyers responded to the area, the Laboon and Gravely, and that the crew was safe. But Maersk at that time sat there and said, okay, hang on, we're going to have to once again reassess. And that brings us to the position we're in now, with Maersk deciding on January 2nd to start rerouting ships back around the Cape of Good Hope and not going through the Red Sea. And again, I come back to this issue, and again, I'm not meaning to pick on Maersk, but Maersk is the leader here that's doing this. Maersk on 14 December, after the attack on Maersk Gibraltar, decided to go around Africa. Then you run U.S. flag vessels through the Bab el-Mandab, the southern Red Sea, and you resume the idea, okay, Maersk, we're going to go back in because the U.S. Navy has just escorted through 3 other Maersk ships that are U.S. flagged through. We're going to send our ships through. They decide to send their ships through right around New Year's on December 30th and 31st. And one of their Maersk ships not only gets hit, but gets attacked by small boats and nearly captured. So that causes Maersk to go out. And that has caused the disruptions that we're seeing right now. So here you see the track of Maersk Hangzhou. You see it heading southbound here, or south westward here, out of the Straits of Malacca, heading to Africa, when all of a sudden it was diverted back up, heads back into the region, sits here into the Arabian Sea, turns off its AIS. It did not sail across the Arabian Peninsula. It turns off its AIS, runs through the Gulf of Aden, through the Bab el-Mandeb, and right around here in the southern Red Sea is where it's attacked. It is sitting right now at the southern end of the Suez Canal, waiting to go through. Interestingly enough, we have not seen any images of ships that have been hit, except for a ship that was struck out here in the Arabian Sea by the Iranians, and that was released by the Indians who were looking at the ship. It's been really interesting to say that we have not seen images of damaged vessel. So one of the things marine traffic allows you to do is to go back and look at where ships have been. This is Maersk Hangzhou. And if you go back and work it backwards, right now it's in the Suez southern anchorage, you can pull it back. And what you find out is back in October, when it was doing its route through the Mediterranean, it routed through Haifa. And this has been one of the connections that have been made, that this ship had a connection. Now, let me be clear about something. I think this is an absolute ludicrous connection right here. It really is. This is a ship that visited back in October. If you're going to go back and look at where every ship has ever been in its history, you're going to find ships going to places you don't like all the time. I mean, the USS Eisenhower, the aircraft that's in the southern Gulf of Aden right now, has been to Haifa multiple times. Are the Houthi going to attack that ship? Good luck. Go ahead and do it. See what happens to you, because that's not going to end very well for them. So the idea that you're going to connect to vessels, it's one thing if you're going to make a connection and sit there and say, well, we're supporting the Palestinians and Hamas in Gaza, and therefore we're going to support them. But to sit there and find a ship that's been back there in October, and even further back for some of these vessels is I think, a ridiculous thing. Because again, that ship and crew have nothing to do with what's going on in Israel and Gaza right now. All right, what does this mean for you, the shipper who's got cargo booked on there, or more importantly, just the normal consumer who is sitting here watching this and saying, I could care less about what's going on in the Red Sea? Well, what you're starting to see is the hike and increase in shipping rates. Now, let's be clear. Some ships, container ships, are still getting through. Just saw a COSCO ship, the COSCO Kilimanjaro. COSCO is the Chinese overseas shipping company. That is the state line of mainland China. We just saw several vessels of CMA CGM, the French line, go through. Both CMA CGM and their affiliate APL were able to get ships through. But even though they're getting a few ships through, you see this story by Reuters, CMA CGM hikes shipping rates between Asia and Mediterranean, with the increase going into effect as of January 15, will be up 100%. We're seeing an increase in the rates going into this area. And that tells us that we're seeing that as of January 15, which refers to the date of loading in the origin ports, and until further notice, CMA CGM FAK, which is the freight all kinds, this is their coverall for all 40-foot long FEU containers, going between Asia and the Western Mediterranean will be up $6,000, up from $3,000 on January 1st. And again, this is not alone. We've already seen other lines adding on surcharges for extra fuel, for handling, whereas other companies are just not even going to try the Red Sea route. Hapag, who is the first company alongside Maersk back in December 15th, they haven't gone back at all. And Maersk, for very good reason, Hapag, for very good reason, doesn't want to go back. They've seen some ships get hit. They don't want to be anywhere near this. And so Hapag is announcing that they're staying way clear of this. At the same time, you hear very little about this, but the Houthi have hijacked a ship back in November, the Galaxy Leader, and they're holding the crew hostage. And I keep seeing these bots and whatever these are on Twitter, X, and all these other social media sites talking about this, but they're holding the crew hostage. And there's no nice way to be held hostage. If you're not allowed to freely go, you're being held hostage. And these people are hostages on the Galaxy Leader. They're not being allowed to leave. It is a poor condition. And this is a big problem. A lot of videos out there with Houthis sailing around it and looking at it. But this is a terrible position. In the meantime, the only thing the U.S. has done kind of offensively, we've done a lot defensively. We've shut down lots of missiles flying around. But offensively, the only thing we've done was use the Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control to go against the financial networks of the Houthi. So I'm sure the Houthi are cowering in their bits, in their shoes right now, that the ATM may not work for them to get money out of. I don't think this is a very big issue. This is the one I want to show you, and this is freight rates. So this is Freightos and their kind of global container freight rate. Now, this is not an actual freight rate. This is an index. And an index kind of measures for you all the different elements here that go into play regarding a freight. So this is kind of a big index here because it takes all the world's indices and kind of puts them together. So this looks kind of from the beginning of when the event started. Back in October, this is when Hamas struck out of Gaza and hit Israel, and then Israel retaliated. You'll see freight rates here on the global index was about $1,088. It is now up to $1,346, which doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, this is all indices. This looks at freight going across the Pacific, across the to Europe. It looks at everything, so you're seeing that climb. But the issue I really want to highlight for you is this. That's over the last 3 months. This is the freight over the last year. And you can see where it's coming down from. Early in 2023, freight was up at around almost $2,237 right here. If you go back 2 years, it's even higher. We're talking about freight in here right around 9, almost 10,000. And if you go back 3 years and you look at the full measure, you can see all the way back here, we're looking at $11,000. This is the height of the supply chain crisis. This is when the container carriers were making massive amounts of profit. And if you look back here, the entire length of this index, and it goes all the way back to, I think, about 2016, you'll see that freight rates were really low for a long time. And it's during the supply chain crisis that we see freights go through the roof. And what they use this profitability for right here is several things. They paid off a lot of loans and a lot of debt they had, but they also used that to buy a lot of brand new ships. And those brand new ships are being delivered right now. And a lot of those new ships are being delivered, and the container companies are awash in capacity. They have a lot of ships. They have a lot of ships, and they have a lot of ships, but with freight rates falling, which means that, okay, we got all this shipping, we got all this capacity, but we don't have high freight rates. What we need is cargo, and what we need is the freight rates to go up. Well, you can't really generate more cargo. That's going to be on demand. And we've seen with the global economy and kind of teetering on a recession that, purchasing is down. People aren't buying as much, and therefore global trade's down a little bit. So you can't get it up that way. Well, the other way to get it up is to have your route be longer than normally. If all of a sudden you have a ship that can do 6 runs a year, and now all of a sudden, because it's got to go a longer distance, 5 runs a year, you either need to put more freight on that ship to fill it up further, so over 5 voyages it's carrying the same amount of cargo, or you need to add another ship into the mix. And that's perfect for the ocean shipping lines right now because they have the capacity. And to do that capacity, they have to raise freight rates. And everyone's going, well, it's costing the shipping lines more money. I hear this all the time. Oh, it's costing the shipping lines more money because they got to sail further. They got to pay for more gas and handling charges and charter rates for ships. They pass that on to you. You understand that, right? They're not swallowing this cost. They don't swallow any cost. They move it on to you. And so that is going to come onto you. And this diversion around Africa is going to have a big check. When all of a sudden this route here is blocked on my trusty Lego globe built by me and my son, when all of a sudden this route is blocked, and now all of a sudden to get from Asia, you have to go down the southern end of Africa, that's going to increase your rate. Particularly when all of a sudden over here, the Panama Canal is giving you trouble, and you can only get about 2/3 of the capacity through there, which, by the way, is going down. We're seeing it go down because now we're in the dry season and we can expect problems in the canal going further. This creates massive problems. And so the ocean shipping companies aren't just formulating economic policy. When they make decisions, when Maersk makes a decision on December 15th to go around Africa, when they decide on December 24th, okay, we're going to go through the Red Sea, and then on January 2nd, when they decide, no, we're going to go back around Africa again, that's not just an economic decision. That's a political decision. That's a military decision, because this is going to drive things. We just heard the U.S. Navy announce the Ford battle group is heading out of the Mediterranean, heading home, which means, does the Eisenhower stay down here? Does it deploy up into the Mediterranean to cover Hezbollah and Iran in northern Israel, to cover what's going on in the Black Sea? Or does the Vincent Group, which is over here in Singapore right now, come out and cover where the Eisenhower was? A lot of geopolitical moves going on here. 2024 is going to be a really interesting year. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new episodes as they come out. This week, I got a special for everybody. I've been meaning to do it, and we're going to do it. We're going to cover the beginning of the year, the state of the U.S. Merchant Marine. I want to cover each of the sectors in the U.S. Merchant Marine. We're going to look at the ships. All the time, I see these journals and publications do the almanacs for the first of the year. They cover the Navy, they cover the Coast Guard, they cover the Marines and Air Force. But we're going to do it for the U.S. Merchant Marine, something that I don't think gets done enough. So we're going to have short little features that look at one little slice of the Merchant Marine each day, quick videos, maybe about 5-10 minutes off, and you can get your little slice. We'll be talking about individual shipping lines like Matson and APL and Liberty and ARC. And we'll also be looking at Military Sealift Command. We'll look at NOAA. We'll look at the different areas of MSC. We'll talk about the Maritime Security Program. We'll talk about the Tanker Security Program. We're going to look at all of it. So please tune in for that. It's going to be a great one to take a look at. Until the next episode, this is Sal signing off.